Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the Afternoon Agenda here on GB News with me, Alex Phillips. Now this show is all about opinion and debate on things that are, or perhaps really should be, on your agenda. So, with that in mind, here's what we'll be covering today. New Year's celebrations are put on ice as the government warns us not to make plans that can't be changed or delayed. I'll be asking how the prospect of further restrictions is going down with rebel MPs. Vladimir Putin says Russia will be forced to take tough action on Ukraine unless the West is less aggressive. We'll ask how close we are to military intervention. And it may not be on the agenda of traditional news outlets, but today we really need to talk about philanthropy. Should the super rich give less and pay more tax? That's the agenda for the next hour. What's on yours? You can, of course, email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Polly.
Good afternoon. This is your GB News at 4 o'clock. The First Minister of Wales has announced that the country will move to COVID Alert Level 2 on Boxing Day. The measures include 2-metre social distancing in public and places of work. The rule of 6 is also being introduced in pubs, restaurants, cinemas and theatres. Face coverings are going to be needed to be worn in hospitality settings at all times, apart from when seated. And there's going to be a limit on the number of people attending large events, with 30 allowed for indoor events and 50 for outdoors.
Now, nobody wanted to see a return to alert levels and to the protections that I've announced today. But we are now entering a really serious phase of the pandemic. Wales will reopen after Christmas, but in order to do so safely, we have to do everything we can to go on protecting ourselves and taking care of others.
Meanwhile, the Welsh Health Minister will begin offering a new formulation of the Pfizer COVID jab for at-risk children in the new year. That comes after the UK's Medicines and Healthcare Agency gave the green light to the jab. They say a review showed it was safe for 5 to 11-year-olds who are at risk or in contact with those who are vulnerable. Further advice regarding the jab for other children is expected in the next few days. Medical officers have praised NHS staff for their tireless work during the pandemic, but they're warning of tough winter months ahead. They're urging staff to prepare for multiple challenges as hospital admissions with the Omicron variant are rising very rapidly. The Chief Executive of King's College Hospital in London is also concerned at the number of COVID-related staff shortages.
We were at around about 100 or so COVID-related staff absences about 10, 11 days ago, and that figure is now over 600. So staff are coping, partly because they know they have to cope. They're professionals, they're clinical professionals, they're outstanding people, and they're doing what they have been trained to do. But it's difficult.
The UK economy has grown at a much slower pace than first thought between July and September. The Office for National Statistics said the economy expanded by 1.1% in the third quarter of this year. That's compared with an initial assessment of 1.3%. Experts expect the economy to shrink further in December as new COVID restrictions may be introduced. Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been accused of another count of rape. The charge relates to a new complainant and is alleged to have taken place in July of this year. The 27-year-old Frenchman appeared at Chester Crown Court this morning. He's been in custody since August. He's now accused of 7 counts of rape relating to 4 women. And a deputy head teacher has pleaded guilty at Liverpool Crown Court to 18 child sex abuse offences, including 2 counts of rape. Julie Morris admitted filming herself and her partner raping a girl under the age of 13. The 44-year-old had been safeguarding lead at her school in Wigan, but the offences do not relate to her employment. Morris will be sentenced later today. A government minister in Madagascar has said he swam for 12 hours after his helicopter crashed at sea during a rescue mission. Serge Geller, who leads the National Gendarmerie, was with a team searching the northeastern coast of the country after a cargo ship illegally carrying 138 passengers sank. At least 64 people have died and 24 others are missing. 50 survivors, though, have been found. That's all from me. You're up to date. Now back to the afternoon agenda with Alex.
Philanthropy. Is it really all about sharing the wealth and making the world a better place? Or is it the must-have accessory for super-rich social justice warriors? A way to play with their vast wealth, funneling it into pet projects to shore up their own interests. A form perhaps of buying influence, an elite power play to radiate virtue while promoting luxury ideologies to mere mortals while rolling about in the trappings of a high net worth existence. Certainly when a flotilla of yachts and an aerobatic display of private jets rock up at a remote island paradise to preach about emissions, it smacks of hot air. A lot of elite philanthropy focuses on elite causes. Rather than change the world and close the wealth divide, all too often they reinforce it. The giving of the super-rich often betrays the whims of the billionaire rather than the priorities of society. In some cases, they even undermine them. Take, for instance, say, George Soros, whose Open Society Foundation has often come under fire from the right for funding ultra-left causes, from BLM to stopping Brexit. In the UK, the world's second most philanthropic nation after America, a vast chunk of philanthropy goes to elite schools and universities. More than 2/3 of millionaire donations went to their alma maters, with half, totalling almost £5 billion, going to just 2 universities. You guessed it, Oxford and Cambridge. When the rich give, you can bet it isn't to inner-city state schools. Over £1 billion has been funnelled into the arts by loaded Brits, from opera houses to galleries, while only 1/5 of that was donated to alleviate poverty. Hardly feeding the hungry with hoity-toity highbrow cultural nourishment, is it? Yet, not all philanthropy is cynical. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has doubled the amount spent on malaria research and did the same with polio, leading to 2.5 billion children now vaccinated against the disease, almost eradicating it. The foundation has given $45 billion since its inception and saved millions of lives. Indeed, Bill Gates helped to set up the Giving Pledge with Warren Buffett, where the world's super-rich agree to give the majority of their wealth to charitable causes, with now more than 200 signatories from 23 countries, although skeptics question its real-world impact. The Gates Foundation alone often gives over £5 billion a year, more than the foreign aid budgets of the vast majority of countries. Yet foundations can also offer lucrative loopholes, enabling elites to dodge democratically elected governments to pursue their fads while opting out of full fiscal participation. At the Davos gathering in 2019, where the world's most rich and influential mutually massaged their egos by chewing over the issues of the day, historian Rutger Bregman told the crowd to stop talking about philanthropy and start talking about taxes, calling anything else proverbial BS. In fact, the cocktail of charity tax relief and gift aid in the UK means that when a billionaire shells out a wodge for a cause, we, the humble taxpayer, must match fund a chunk of it. coughing up for causes we have zero say about over some Panama paper tycoon. Meanwhile, the exploding number of mega-rich has seen a slew of opportunistic philanthropy minders bubble up, with 250,000 organisations helping their clients smash $1.5 trillion of cash on supposed do-goodery. And there is also the question, of course, of ill-gotten gains. Who can forget the farcical focus on offensive statues of old slave traders come benefactors, while real lives were being ravaged by the social and economic impacts of a global pandemic? Are generous hotshots simply picking up the slack where incompetent governments fall short? Or is it a lavish way of blowing smoke up one's own derriere while meddling in the lives of poor plebs? In, of course, mindfully mild, misanthropic, festive spirit, today we really need to talk about philanthropy. Well, joining me first is the philanthropist and founder of Phones for You, John Caudwell. John, great to have you on. You've committed to giving away at least 70% of your wealth to charitable causes. Tell me your rationale behind that. What's your motivation?
Well, first of all, can I just say that that was a very interesting and thought-provoking, if somewhat over-cynical view of philanthropic giving, but I'm certainly not going to dispute that there is a lot of substance behind what you say there, and I've witnessed it, so I don't disagree with that at all. I think it's just overly cynical. What motivated me, I don't really know. Right from the early days when I was 7 years old, I saw myself as being very rich and very charitable. I did the very rich bit, and I didn't really do the very charitable bit until about 25 years ago. Probably 30 years ago, actually, and then I found the cause of children. And I found that actually through the NSPCC. And when I saw the way these kids were often treated by relatives who sexually abused them, sometimes the parents, sometimes relatives, it was heartbreaking, the damage that it did to those young child minds. And I realized I wanted to do a lot more for children. And so I set up Caudwell Children. And Caudwell Children will help any child with any illness whatsoever if the parents can't afford to get the help anywhere else. And up to yet, we've helped 60,000 children in the last 20 years, but over 15,000 probably by the end of this year.
How important is it to you when you're donating, one assumes, millions to projects, to Caudwell Children or whichever other lucky people benefit from your generosity? How important is it that you have a degree of control and you can see the pathway to impact and how that money's being spent and how it's changing lives?
Well, I think the word control is probably the wrong word, but I am very, very diligent to make certain that the charity is well run, that the cause absolutely touches my heart and is a worthy cause. So you wouldn't see me donating to art museums and I'm not saying they're not worthy causes, because we do need to encourage culture, but it's not my cause. My cause is helping people in desperate need who would not get the help without me doing something like Caudwell Children and other causes that I've done, like helping Elton John with his AIDS Foundation and visiting Africa with him and seeing the work that's done there. So my work that I do has to touch my heart and has to make a huge difference to people's lives.
When you see some of the charitable activities of celebrities, let's say, or when we see Meghan and Harry in America telling us to do this and do that while getting multi-million-pound paychecks from Netflix, do you think that some of it does smack of hypocrisy?
Oh, without doubt, yes. But the one point I'd make, Alex, is that there's a lot of motives for people to do charity work. But the one thing I would remind everybody of is when that child has got muscular atrophy, can't move, can't walk, can't do anything, that child isn't bothered on the donor's motives for donating £25,000 for their wheelchair, because it transforms that child's life. It doesn't matter whether the person's got driven by ego, driven by feel-good factor, driven by wanting some sort of public acclamation. The simple fact is that child is helped in a way that they wouldn't get helped otherwise. Of course, it's much nicer when people feel it in the heart and feel it with a passion and really, really buy into the cause and give the heart and soul to it. Of course, that's much more wholesome and much more beautiful. But the child isn't bothered. The child just needs the help.
When we look at, say, sort of industrialists and entrepreneurs who are generous and set up foundations and charitable causes, but then their own companies have innovative and legal ways, but innovative ways of avoiding paying taxation, do you think that's a sort of difficult juxtaposition, and that in a way it's sort of circumventing democracy and buying into a degree of influence, even if it might be for good, that is perhaps inappropriate?
Well, the argument that I don't like much about the super rich, those that use this argument, is that they say that minimizing the taxes enables them to be more philanthropic and they can do a lot more good with the money than the government. I do find that somewhat feeble as an excuse, because we know the government will waste money, unfortunately, but the poor need supporting. And we need to pay our taxes in order to support those people. And if everybody had the attitude that they could do better with the money than the government, what happens to all those poor people? But I also question that the people that say that, are they actually giving the money away, or is it just a way of gathering more for themselves? And I can be quite unpopular in certain quarters because I advocate absolutely everybody pays the taxes in the UK, pays the appropriate taxes and joins the Giving Pledge. And, I just don't know why people don't do that, because when you're super wealthy, it's your duty to pay your taxes. It's the duty to help the people in the country that have helped you make the money. But I also have the other argument really as well, which is, why would you want to leave billions behind to your family and children when you could leave half of that, and you could argue that half of enough is more than enough to decadently spoil those children's lives, but at least you'd be giving half to good causes, which you can then put down in your will as to which causes they might be. I mean, my causes that I've got in my will, and I hope to do a lot more during my lifetime, incidentally, but, whatever's left behind for my children to do, the causes are very demanding. It's very demanding on the children to do due diligence on the charities, make sure the charities are super effective, and wherever possible to use the donation that they make on my behalf to leverage other people's money and get to influence and get other people to do the same thing.
John, thank you so much for coming on. I've honestly been humbled by your candour and learning of your generosity. It's been a delight welcoming you on the afternoon agenda today. That's John Caudwell, who's a philanthropist and founder of Phones for You, and an all-round good egg, it seems. Well, joining me now is Andrew Wigley, founder of universityphilanthropy.com. Now, tell me about your organisation, Andrew. I've not heard of it before, universityphilanthropy.com. What is it that you guys do?
So thanks for having me, Alex. And what we look at is philanthropic giving trends to higher education institutions and universities, both in the UK and around the world. And you cited in your introduction how it is that two universities in particular are the ones that always sort of do extremely well in the annual sort of philanthropy indexes and indices. And it is the case that education is one of those areas that people like Mr. Caudwell and others, like giving to, and universities in particular, because they often have very good governance structures. They are good. They are seen to have reliable sort of systems in place, so that you know that donation that you're making is going to be put to good cause. And I think Mr. Caudwell sort of alluded to that in his sort of comments about the importance of trying to do your due diligence. If you're going to make a big donation and you want to make sure that it's going to a cause that's going to handle that money well, you're looking for an organisation or an institution which both meets the cause and meets the interest that you have, but also has the systems in place to handle that in a responsible way. So higher education institutions and colleges do quite well on that, and they are one of the big beneficiaries of philanthropy globally.
Do you ever come across among some of the benefactors that you might deal with an expectation of reciprocity and money under the table? If I donate to this, will you make sure that my son or daughter gets into this particular college or gets this particular room in this particular halls of residence? Or am I just being far too pessimistic?
No, I think I think this happens, and it's extremely difficult for institutions to navigate that. I mean, we saw, didn't we, recently with the big donation to Oxford University and the renaming of a college, the Tow College, to sort of reflect the donation and the benefactor that universities sometimes have to take unpalatable causes if they really want to get that money in. And I think in the case of Oxford, on that case, and I know I've been on GBNews talking about that before, the danger is for an institution is that you start to look like you're putting the names of your illustrious colleges are up for sale, and that the going rate is going to be 150 million for renaming a college in your name, and I think how you navigate the politics around this is extremely challenging. I certainly know the case of one vice chancellor who's had very uncomfortable conversations with a donor to the university who has, exactly as you suggested, wanted to get special dispensation for his son, I think it was, who didn't make the grade and was going to be chucked out, and I don't know what the outcome of that was, but clearly these conversations surface and difficult decisions have to be taken.
Yeah, indeed. Andrew, it's been fascinating talking to you. Andrew Wigley, founder of philanthropyuniversity.com. Interesting. I don't think it's going to be, probably about a millennium, I think, until the College of Alex Phillips is established, judged by that. Well, let's talk now to Matthew Reid, Chief Executive of the end-of-life charity Marie Curie. Matthew, it's a delight having you on. I mean, the British are well known for their generosity. I think we're one of the most charitable nations. How important is it to a charity like yours to get big donors and philanthropists giving money? Because I think you're very often collection plates at, funerals, cremations, so on and so forth. I'd imagine make a huge amount of what you guys receive. But how important are the big name donors to the cause?
Yeah, well, as you say, philanthropic giving in the UK is a critical part of the UK society. It's how a lot of good works are funded. It's a really important part of our income at Marie Curie, for example. Over the last 18 months of the pandemic, Marie Curie has been stepping up to do all we possibly can do to support the nation in this time of crisis. And the philanthropic support we've had during that has actually enabled us to support more people at the end of life than we've ever supported before in a 12-month period. So philanthropists play a really important role in helping to fund charities and to allow charities to have the social impact that they have in the UK at the moment. It can go beyond that, though, actually, as well. Philanthropists also bring a degree of professional expertise. They can bring contacts. They can bring their own professional experience as well. So our experience of working with philanthropists is this is far more about a partnership approach where we together see how can we create something better for the British public.
Do you actively court some of the super rich or the mega rich to say, you've probably got more coins down the back of your sofa than the average character? Would you mind, putting some in our collection tin? Or do they come to you?
Well, we have donors from people who put money into the collection tin during the Grave Daffodil Appeal in March, from people who are direct donors to us, people who leave legacies to us, and philanthropists as well. And it's all those donors and supporters are really important to us. The conversations we have with people, they come to us, we go to them, is look, together, how can we create something better within the UK? And for Marie Curie, how can we create a better end-of-life experience for more people? And so we focus on the impact and what we can create together. And I think that's the thing that really gets philanthropists out of bed as well. It makes the philanthropists think, look, this is a really interesting thing to be part of as well. It's not just a donation, it's actually part of how I experience who I am as a person. As John was saying earlier, we can't take it with us when we die. And so it gives philanthropists a real way to make a real tangible difference in their lifetime as well. And we think that's really important to people.
I'm not necessarily expecting you to have the stats or ratios in front of you, but if you were to sort of estimate the amount of money that comes from the people shaking the tins in shopping centres and people putting money into the collection plate or signing up for monthly donations who are very modest, average incomes, and the money given by the super rich, what sort of ratio do you think that would be?
Well, across the UK, that ratio does change from year to year. In fact, the total giving across the UK has actually dropped slightly over the last 12 months. But actually now is the time when we think there are some really exciting opportunities right across the UK and many, many charitable sectors and foundations to really help us all rebuild the UK as we come out of the back of the pandemic in due course. So in the arts and in sport, in end-of-life care, where Marie Curie works, in children's services, as John was saying earlier, there's some real opportunities now to make a really big difference. And we think actually a number of people are really very interested now in, well, what does the future of the UK look like and how can we be part of trying to build that? And I think right across the charity sector, therefore, people will be looking for those interesting propositions, interesting creative ways of engaging people to come and join us and be part of creating that social impact. And actually, for Marie Curie, we also are very privileged to work with a number of corporate donors as well. And during the pandemic, some of those partnerships have also had sort of other benefits for the public. So, for example, we have a partnership with SPA, and part of what SPA are able to do for us is help us deliver our PPE to our Marie Curie nurses. So every day and every night, thousands of Marie Curie nurses out in the community caring for people at the end of their lives with that love and care that Marie Curie is so well known for. But they need their PPE. So SPA are able to, as well as raising money for us, they are able to also find a way in which they could distribute PPE through their stores. So our nurses could pop in, buy their milk and bread, and also collect their PPE as well. So there's some very creative stuff happening at the moment all around the UK, I think, that's every day having a really strong impact on the British public.
Matthew, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. That's Matthew Reid, who's the Chief Executive of Marie Curie. It's heartwarming, isn't it? We are a giving nation, we Brits, and we should be proud of that. Well, we'll be continuing this conversation throughout the show, and I want to know what you think. You can email me, gbnews@gbnews.uk. Any good stories out there? You can also tweet me at GBNews, and we're putting up a poll asking, should the super rich give less but pay more tax? Cast your vote so I know what you, the nation, really thinks. Well, it's time for a short break now and a cheeky little check on the weather forecast, but don't go anywhere.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again, good afternoon. Well, we've got a change underway now across the UK with some rain pushing in. As it bumps into the colder air across Scotland, we've got a risk of some ice here, but generally speaking, over the next few days, it's breezier and less cold, at least in the south. Now, the milder air is tied in with these weather fronts pushing their way in from the Atlantic, which is dislodging the area of high pressure that's been with us for the last few days and setting the scene for a more changeable and unsettled theme for the next few days. We've got rain then pushing its way northwards across Scotland this evening. The nice risk are tied in with this and perhaps some snow across the mountains of northern Scotland as well. Elsewhere, though, the rain will sweep through, and then we're left with a lot of cloud around, a few clear spells, but on the whole, quite cloudy skies to end the night. And it won't be as cold as it was last night. An early dip in temperatures across some eastern areas of England, but generally speaking, those temperatures coming up from the southwest as we start Thursday. So we've got quite a wet start, though, across parts of Scotland through Thursday. The rain here will tend to peter out for a time before it gets caught up by this next band of rain working its way in from the southwest. Not much rain across England and Wales, I don't think, from this, but certainly for parts of northern England, perhaps Northern Ireland, certainly for Scotland, quite a wet day to come with quite persistent rain by the afternoon and potentially some more snow developing across the mountains of Scotland. Milder in the south, but colder elsewhere still. Then a wet night to come for Thursday night into Friday. Potentially quite significant amounts of snow across the mountains of Scotland, so something to bear in mind if you're travelling in this part of the world. Elsewhere, though, it will be largely dry to take us into Christmas Eve morning, although with some clear skies and a now damp ground, best before some fog patches to develop. Quite a mild night, though, certainly in comparison to many recent nights, temperatures staying in double figures towards the southwest. So Christmas Eve will start off on a fairly grey and murky note, perhaps some dense fog patches, which will be slow to clear across central southern parts of England on Christmas Eve. Next batch of rain, though, waiting in the wings. This sets the scene then for quite an unsettled Christmas period, with certainly a risk of some rain across many parts of the country at times, and with temperatures quite low in the north, there's a chance of some snow too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. You're watching the Afternoon Agenda, and there's lots more still to come. But first, let's look at the news headlines with Polly.
Good afternoon. The latest news headlines. The First Minister of Wales has announced the country will move to COVID alert level 2 on Boxing Day. The measures include 2-metre social distancing in public and places of work. The rule of 6 has been brought back for pubs, restaurants, cinemas and theatres. And face coverings will be needed in hospitality settings if moving around inside. There'll be a limit too on the number of people attending large events. 30 people are allowed to gather indoors and 50 outdoors. The Welsh Health Minister will begin offering a new formulation of the Pfizer COVID jab for at-risk children in the new year. That comes after the UK's Medicines and Healthcare Agency gave the green light to the jab. They say a review showed it was safe for 5 to 11-year-olds who are at risk or who are in contact with those who are vulnerable. Further advice regarding that jab for other children is expected in due course. Police investigating the disappearance of a man who went missing after leaving a London nightclub have begun searching the River Thames. 20-year-old Harvey Parker was last seen leaving a nightclub in central London in the early hours of Friday morning. Following a search of local CCTV, police say they're now concerned he may have entered the water. I'm back with a full news update at the top of the hour. See you then.
Thank you, Polly. The Prime Minister is being called on to set out post-Christmas COVID plans after one of his health ministers warned that there is uncertainty around whether people can make plans to hold celebrations on New Year's Eve. Boris Johnson has so far reassured people that no further restrictions will be introduced before December the 25th because there isn't enough evidence on the severity of Omicron to justify stricter measures. But Conservative Health Minister Gillian Keegan urged caution today and says the government must base its decisions on emerging data. Well, earlier today, Wales First Minister Mark Drakeford announced the country would move to COVID alert level 2 from Boxing Day. Well, joining me now is the Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson. Lee, are you the type to welcome more restrictions? I have a feeling you're not.
I'll take a wild guess, Alex. Absolutely not. I welcome the Prime Minister's announcement. No news is good news at the moment, so it took a sensible decision to wait a few days. Look, the data doesn't back up any further restrictions or any future restrictions at this present moment in time, and I don't want to see us being going the same direction, should I say, as Wales or Scotland. These are quite severe measures actually from Boxing Day onwards. I don't want us to get into that situation. He's quite right what he's doing. He's looking at the data day by day. And you know what? This new variant, this Omicron variant, it's not as bad as we first thought it was. There's less hospitalisations. There's less people being poorly. Less people fortunately dying. So let's be sensible. Let's have a sensible and nice Christmas and look forward to a good New Year.
If only. I mean, we've been groomed this way before, haven't we? We were told last Christmas that there wouldn't be anything, and then there was, and it would only be a very short lockdown, and essentially it dragged on for 3 months. Does it feel a bit to you like the government have now invented a get-out clause for the NHS being overwhelmed, which frankly it is every single year?
I think we do sometimes hero worship the NHS a little bit too much. You know, it's there for a reason. It's there to make us better. It's there to save lives. And it's there for, you know, to help us during the winter months. It's normally overwhelmed in the winter months with flu and other illnesses and falls from elderly people. So that's the job it does. You know, we cannot wrap ourselves in cotton wool. We cannot be held hostage to this virus. You know, the NHS will always cope, whatever we throw at it. They do a fantastic job. But really, Alex, we need to come out of this now. We need to crack on with our lives. We need to live our lives and just get on with it. And like I say, do not be a victim. Do not be a hostage, let's say, to this virus.
If the government do decide that they need to put in place, or they say they need to put in place, some form of restrictions, and they recall Parliament in order to vote on that, do you think it stands a cat in hell's chance of going through? Or at this point, would Tory backbenchers rebel in enough numbers to prevent further restrictions being put in place, do you think?
That's a good question, actually. It's definitely pretty good data for that to get through the House at this moment in time. I know I was one of the people that voted against the government last week. Wasn't happy having to do that, but I felt that, you know, the direction of travel was going the wrong way. I thought, you know, we need to, you know, to live our lives now. We need to come out of these restrictions, if you like, and if there was another vote next week, because I would imagine that if there were restrictions, we'd have to vote on it next week and record next week. If the data is the same data as it is today, then it would be very, very difficult for anybody to vote for future restrictions.
Do you trust the data?
Not always. I think the data can be manipulated to, you know, anybody can manipulate the data. I mean, the data I always look at is my local hospital, the hospitalisations, how many people are dying, how many people are being admitted, and it's not that bad at the moment. I mean, last year it was a lot worse. It was overwhelmed, and it was an easier decision, if you like, to vote for extra measures, have the lockdowns, have the restrictions, and all those measures in place. But this year, it's a completely different kettle of fish. You know, I think the people in this country, we should give them a little bit more credit. They're very very sensible on the whole. We've learned to live with it. We know to wear masks. We know to social distance. We're careful where we go. We're careful when we go shopping. We're careful not to visit our elderly and vulnerable too much if we've got a sniffle. So you know what? Give us a bit of credit. Let's crack on living our lives. And if we do that, then we should be okay.
I mean, the latest government advice now is that 5-plus-year-olds who are perhaps vulnerable should be getting their booster jabs. Do you think that the government policy on booster jabs is the right approach, given that actually we're being told that, well, Omicron seems to be able to evade much of the vaccine protection, that having the vaccine doesn't necessarily reduce transmission? We've got all these mixed messages, and yet there's a huge government push now to get everybody getting a booster jab before the end of December. They're haranguing me with regular phone calls and text messages. Do you think that's the right approach, or should we have perhaps bided a bit more time on that front as well?
Well, no, I think, the government was accused of when the pandemic first started 20 months ago, we were accused of acting too slowly in different things. And now, we're sometimes accused of being too overcautious, too protective, like a protective parent. I think the booster, I think people should take up the booster, but at the same time, we should not be looking at future restrictions if the data doesn't back it up. Well, I've had 3 jabs now. I've had my 2 jabs and my booster. I feel reasonably safe. My parents are the same, and the rest of my family. So I say, get your booster, get your jabs, but come on, let's start and live our lives.
Lee Anderson, MP, fantastic speaking to you, Conservative MP for Ashfield. I just need to make a little self-correction there, because I said government advice, when in fact it's been advisors to the government advising the government that 5 to 11-year-olds who are vulnerable get the vaccine. Little nuance there, but important to make that clear, I think. Now, I'm back after a short break, so don't go anywhere. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
As the war of words heats up between Russia and the US over the situation in Ukraine, there seems to be a glimmer of hope for a diplomatic solution. Both superpowers have now agreed a meeting early in January of next year. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he'll be forced into taking a tough response on Ukraine if the West doesn't drop what he called its aggressive stance. Russia wants security guarantees from the West on the situation and is against Ukraine joining NATO. Putin said, if the aggressive line of our Western colleagues continues, we will take adequate military technical response measures and react harshly to unfriendly steps. Well, let's talk to Samantha de Bender, an Associate Fellow with the Royal Institute of International Affairs at the think tank Chatham House. Samantha, great to have you on. I mean, for those who sort of keep a keen eye on geopolitics, Putin's demands about NATO have been quite abundant when it comes to his manoeuvres in Ukraine. But do you think he is going to cross that border at any point? He's amassed quite a few troops.
Well, I think what we all need to remember is that Putin already has crossed that border. Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, and that was an invasion of a sovereign country, taking over a sovereign country's territory. Russia has invaded eastern Ukraine in the Donbass, and although this was not an official invasion, there are reports, lots of reports by the UK, by the US, by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe of Russian troops on the ground in Ukraine since 2014. And in a rather funny, very bizarre twist last week, there was the first incident that really showed Russia is in Ukraine, even for the Russians, because a catering company that was providing food to Russian troops in Ukraine was accused of bribery and taken to court. Now, all documents pertaining to this case were quickly removed from the Russian press. But the fact that you have a Russian catering company supplying Russian troops in Ukraine is a pretty big admission that they're already there. But I will try to answer your question more directly, which is he going to send troops officially this time into Ukraine? It's really hard to say. I mean, he has amassed anything between 90,000 to 125,000 troops on Ukraine's border, not just troops, but tanks, even field hospitals. That looks very much like he's preparing to invade. Is he calling our bluff? Is he making us believe he's about to invade in order to exact concessions from the West? That is anyone's guess, really. He is capable of invading, and he would be capable of invading very fast if he were to do so. And I don't think that we could put anything past him if you look at his track record of the last few years.
I mean, do you think America really are going to talk tough to Russia? They've said that if Ukraine wants to join NATO, that's up to Ukraine. If Ukraine wants to align itself with the EU, that's up to Ukraine again. So Putin doesn't seem to be getting his concessions, does he? Yet at the same time, as you said, when he did go into the Donbass, when he did go into Crimea, the international community tutted, but nothing really happened. So who has the upper hand in this?
It's a very good question. Let's take the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. Putin knows very well that Ukraine cannot join NATO, even if it wanted to, and even if NATO wanted Ukraine to join it, because there are certain criteria for joining NATO. One of those really important criteria is that there must not be any territorial disputes on the territory of the country that wants to join. And Ukraine has two very big territorial disputes, Crimea and the Donbass. So Putin has actually created the veto for NATO for Ukraine to join NATO, and he knows that. So this is posturing. This is all the smokescreens saying, "Oh, I don't want Ukraine to join NATO." He knows that Ukraine cannot join NATO tomorrow. There are lots of other criteria for Ukraine to join NATO, which is really seriously tackling their corruption problem. Getting their economic and military reforms certainly more advanced than they currently are. So it's difficult to really understand what he's doing. Does the West have the upper hand? Does Russia have the upper hand? What the West has done, and unfortunately even our defense secretary said something very bizarre a few days ago, saying if Putin goes into Ukraine, it is very unlikely that London will send troops. Now, I'm not saying we should send troops into Ukraine, but before anything happening, saying, well, we will not actually do the maximum to support our friend, our not ally in the formal legal sense of the word, but nevertheless a country with whom we are entertaining potential allied relations, to immediately just rule out certain things before conflict even starts is a little bit like going to a poker game and saying, well, whatever happens, I'm not going to call your bluff, I'm going to fold. So it's very strange that the West is immediately saying to Putin, ruling out certain military options. I think it's great that discussions are going to take place. Some of the proposals that Russia made, some of them were outrageous, and a lot of things have been written about some of the outrageous remarks. Russia also proposed reviving the concept of having hotlines between the US and Russia. Russia has revived the idea of having regular consultations and threat assessments. Could that lead to a revival of the NATO-Russia Council? We don't know. Those could be good things on both sides if they actually happen. And I think it is always good to talk, but to talk with very, very open eyes and open ears as to whatever tricks our opponent may be trying to pull under our
Russians
eyes.
certainly do like a game of chess, don't they? Samantha, it's fantastic having your expert insight into this constantly unravelling narrative that will stay across, I'm sure, well into the new year. Samantha de Bendone, who's Associate Fellow at Chatham House. Now, today, we need to talk about philanthropy. I'm asking, should the super rich actually give less but pay more tax instead? Well, let's get some of your views. Tim says it is entirely up to people to dispose of their own money as they see fit. Taxes choke the economy and curtail growth. A lower tax rate generates a higher return. We should slash taxes. Sally says, I don't care what a university calls their various houses, even naming them after a donor. What is concerning is if the donor is allowed to affect what is taught in the respective university. Richard says, the fallacy in this argument is that governments are notorious in wasting whatever money they can get their sticky fingers on. We're going to read out more of your views at the end of the show. Keep them coming in. Well, we're also going to be back after a short break and, of course, a little check-in with the weather forecast. Fingers crossed it's a good one.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again, good afternoon. Well, we've got a change underway now across the UK with some rain pushing in. As it bumps into the colder air across Scotland, we've got a risk of some ice here, but generally speaking, over the next few days, it's breezier and less cold, at least in the south. Now, the milder air is tied in with these weather fronts pushing their way in from the Atlantic, which is dislodging the area of high pressure that's been with us for the last few days and setting the scene for a more changeable and unsettled theme for the next few days. We've got rain then pushing its way northwards across Scotland this evening. The ice risk are tied in with this and perhaps some snow across the mountains of northern Scotland as well. Elsewhere, though, the rain will sweep through and then we're left with a lot of cloud around, a few clear spells, but on the whole, quite cloudy skies to end the night, and it won't be as cold as it was last night. An early dip in temperatures across some eastern areas of England, but generally speaking, those temperatures coming up from the southwest as we start Thursday. So we've got quite a wet start, though, across parts of Scotland through Thursday. The rain here will tend to peter out for a time before it gets caught up by this next band of rain working its way in from the southwest. Not much rain across England and Wales, I don't think, from this, but certainly for parts of northern England, perhaps Northern Ireland, certainly for Scotland, quite a wet day to come with quite persistent rain by the afternoon and potentially some more snow developing across the mountains of Scotland. Milder in the south, but colder elsewhere still. Then a wet night to come for Thursday night into Friday. Potentially quite significant amounts of snow across the mountains of Scotland, so something to bear in mind if you're travelling in this part of the world. Elsewhere, though, it will be largely dry to take us into Christmas Eve morning, although with some clear skies and a now damp ground, best before some fog patches to develop. Quite a mild night, though, certainly in comparison to many recent nights, temperatures staying in double figures towards the southwest. So Christmas Eve will start off on a fairly grey and murky note, perhaps some dense fog patches, which will be slow to clear across central southern parts of England on Christmas Eve. Next batch of rain, though, waiting in the wings. This sets the scene then for quite an unsettled Christmas period, with certainly a risk of some rain across many parts of the country at times, and with temperatures quite low in the north, there's a chance of some snow too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, healthy habits which help people to avoid becoming frail in old age can also help them to avoid getting dementia. That's according to a new study by researchers who looked at data from more than 196,000 people aged over 60 who are registered with the UK Biobank. The Biobank stores information about health, genetics and lifestyle. The scientists in the Division of Geriatric Medicine at Dalhousie University in Canada concluded that taking action to prevent frailty is also likely to prevent dementia. Well, let's talk to Dr. Veena Babu, a London GP who is also founder of the IV Dance, a Bollywood YouTube channel. She leads popular workshops and boot camps. Great to have you back on the show. So what sort of habits are these that we need to build into our lives as people get older to make sure that they stay robust and in good physical health that could also hopefully have a decent knock-on effect to brain health?
You know, to some degree, I think we all know this, right? I'm sure we all know the healthier we are, the active steps we take to engage in physical activity that's going to, empower our mental health as well, will make us healthier. So when studies like this actually put numbers on those facts, it just, I think, should give us more confidence and more energy to go out there and make those changes. So to answer your question, when we talk about physical health, we recommend to all our patients anywhere between 30 minutes of vigorous exercise where you're getting your heart pumping, you're working up a sweat, you're getting a little uncomfortable, at least 5 times a week. 3 times a week, doing some kind of strength training, to get your muscles and your joints working a bit more. That's just looking at your physical health in terms of exercise. Add that with a healthy, balanced diet, cut down the stress you put on your body, be it by engaging in maybe stressful news, your work habits or whatever might make you feel quite negative in terms of your personal life or those environments. Lifestyle choices, smoking, drinking, some people who consume drugs, all of these can have tiny, tiny impacts and together, will have an overall impact on our health. So anywhere in that paradigm, if you make a change, studies have now shown that it can make an overall big impact to frailty and reducing the risk of dementia going forward.
I mean, dementia is something that people of my age, for instance, don't really spend much time thinking about. It seems like something that would, if it is going to happen, is a long time away. But rates are soaring, aren't they? How closely connected do you think that is to overall declining lifestyle in the West, the fact that we're eating badly and we're getting fatter?
That's a very good point. And I think it's in direct correlation to knowledge with the internet, with social media. Let's talk about, even things as TikTok. I've learned so many new tips and facts on TikTok about the way you can pack healthier food or how you can squeeze in 20 minutes of exercise, going here or there. If it's a health professional giving this information, if it is warranted and supported by science and evidence, there is so much information out there. So yes, there is some negative impacts of the Western lifestyle. We have so much more choice when it comes to food and ways to become more sedentary and not be as active. But there's also the positive. There's so many more, minute little bullet tips of what you can do in your day-to-day to help meditate, on your journey to work, or do some breathing exercises if you're having a stressful day, or reaching out and talking to someone if you're stressed about something. So I really think we should use those things to empower ourselves and use it as a power in the West to focus and invest in our physical health.
How important is something like early intervention when it comes to dementia? Is there much that can be done if signs of the disease are traced early and intervention begins immediately?
Not directly. And as the study showed, like you rightly said, nearly 200,000 patients were looked into. Now, some of us will unfortunately have a more predisposed genetic link to having some conditions, be it chronic conditions, be it dementia. In those cases, of course, we don't go around doing genetic tests on a day-to-day basis on each other. But if that link is there and you have a family history of these chronic conditions, it would be wise to really look at our lifestyle choices and think, where can I improve something? Where can I get a bit stronger to avoid these things happening? And this one study actually did show a large number of positive impact if those changes were made. So I think this is actually quite exciting news, and we should really let it sink in. And you're right, when we're young, you don't think of it as much, but we want to maybe remind everyone that we don't want to wait till it's too late, so now is the time to take action.
Wonderful. Sage advice as always. Doc Babu, we love having you on the programme. Dr. Babu there, telling us all we need to get healthier. And she's right. You're watching the Afternoon Agenda, and there's lots more still to come. Well, hello and welcome. If you've only just joined me, where have you been? I'm Alex Phillips. This is the Afternoon Agenda on GB News, and this show is all about opinion and debate on things that are or need to be on your agenda. So, still to come this hour. Regulate the internet dating industry. That's the call today from women who are concerned that the online safety bill is ignoring a sector which poses serious risks. The devastating impact of COVID on our theatres and entertainment venues has been huge this Christmas. But does it pose a long-term threat to the cultural life of the nation? And it may not be on the agenda of traditional news outlets, but in fine festive spirits, we need to talk about philanthropy. Should the super rich actually give less, but pay more in tax? That's the agenda for next hour. What's on yours? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me @gbnews. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Polly.
Good evening, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Polly Middlehurst, and here are your GB News headlines. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases within a 24-hour period in the UK has reached more than 100,000 for the first time since the start of the pandemic. 106,000, in fact, and 122 lab-confirmed COVID-19 cases have been recorded in the UK as of 9 a.m. Wednesday. That's according to government data. A further 140 people have died within 28 days of testing positive. Separate figures published by the Office for National Statistics show since the start of the pandemic there have been 173,000 deaths registered in the UK where COVID-19 was on the death certificate. Meanwhile, in Wales, the First Minister has announced the country will move to COVID Alert Level 2 from Boxing Day. Those measures include 2-metre social distancing in public and at places of work. The Rule of 6 is also being reintroduced in pubs, restaurants, cinemas and theatres. Face coverings will need to be worn in hospitality settings at all times, apart from when seated. There's also going to be a limit on the number of people attending large events, with 30 people allowed for indoor events and 50 for outdoors.
Now, nobody wanted to see the return to alert levels and to the protections that I've announced today. But we are now entering a really serious phase of the pandemic. Wales will reopen after Christmas, but in order to do so safely, we have to do everything we can to go on protecting ourselves and taking care of others.
Mark Drakeford there. Well, the Welsh Health Minister is going to begin offering a new formulation of the Pfizer COVID jab for at-risk children from the new year. That comes after the UK's Medicines and Healthcare Agency gave the green light to the jab. They say a review showed it was safe for 5 to 11-year-olds who are at risk or in contact with those who are vulnerable. Further advice regarding the jab for other children is expected in due course. The UK's chief medical officers have praised NHS staff for their tireless work during the pandemic, but they've warned of tough winter months ahead. They're urging staff to prepare for multiple challenges as hospital admissions with the Omicron variant are rising very rapidly. The chief executive of King's College Hospital in London is also concerned at the number of COVID-related staff shortages. Away from COVID, police investigating the disappearance of a man who went missing in London have now begun searching the River Thames. 20-year-old Harvey Parker was last seen leaving a nightclub in central London in the early hours of Friday morning. Following a search of local CCTV, police say they're now concerned he may have entered the water. The UK economy has grown at a much slower pace than first thought between July and September. The Office for National Statistics said the economy expanded by 1.1% in the third quarter of this year. That's compared with an initial estimate of 1.3%. Experts expect it to shrink further in December as new COVID restrictions are introduced. Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been accused of another count of rape. The charge relates to a new complainant and is alleged to have taken place in July of this year. The 27-year-old Frenchman appeared at Chester Crown Court this morning. He's been in custody since August. He's now accused of 7 counts of rape relating to 4 separate women. And a deputy head teacher has pleaded guilty at Liverpool Crown Court to 18 child sex abuse offences, including 2 counts of rape. Julie Morris admitted filming herself and her partner raping a girl under the age of 13. The 44-year-old had been the safeguarding lead at her school in Wigan in Greater Manchester, but the offences don't relate to her employment. Morris will be sentenced later today. Now, a government minister in Madagascar has said he had to swim for 12 hours after his helicopter crashed at sea during a rescue mission. Serge Geller, who leads the National Gendarmerie, was with a team searching in the northeastern coast of the country after a cargo ship illegally carrying 138 passengers sank. At least 64 people died in the incident. 24 people are still missing, but 50 survivors were found. You're up to date. I have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Until then, it's back to the afternoon agenda.
You know, I often think if I were to land a windfall, I'd probably give a load away. Having been brought up in a happily humble home, I genuinely don't want for much. Of course, I'd take care of my family and my friends. I'd buy a modest manse for me and Mog and chuck the rest at causes I think need promoting. Causes of my choice, relating to issues that matter to me. Well, it's my cheddar, my choice, right? But what about when cashed-up capitalists dodging taxes are funneling funds into philanthropic fads that further their niche worldview? When does charitable giving become subverting the civic contract to buy influence? And how about superstar social justice warriors choreographing self-hagiographies from sprawling Montecito mansions, while the rest of us were incarcerated in airless abodes, opining that we should stop scoffing steak while they heat their palatial condos with the energy supply of a small Pacific island? Are philanthropists super-erogatory do-gooders or faux altruists meddling where, frankly, it isn't welcome? Well, joining us now is Kath Dovey, co-founder of the Beacon Collaborative, a hub to encourage more private assets to be used for public good. Kath, tell me about what you guys do.
We try to encourage wealthy people in the UK to give more money to good causes. Not just giving money, but getting involved, working in their local communities, volunteering, being trustees, just being part of civil society.
And what is your assessment of the wealthy in the UK? Do you think they give more than their fair share, or do you think actually that they should be doing far more than they are?
We have in the UK among the wealthy population, around 1 in 5 gives at a level that you would call generous. I think the wider wealthy population It was interesting when you introduced yourself. We all have a sense of, the little bit more that we would do and could do. And I think most wealthy people give something, but, generosity is highly subjective. And, there's no doubt that wealthy people could do more.
And what sort of things do most elites, when they come to you or you approach them, what sort of things are they interested in giving to? Because, looking at a little audit of research I've done online, and looking at a little audit of where generous donations tend to go, a heck of a lot's given to alma maters, to private schools, to old university colleges, and only about a fifth of the amount that goes to further education and higher education actually goes to tackling things like poverty. Do you think that that's a problem here, that people are sort of giving money to causes and missing out where the need really is?
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite hard to give money away well. And most people, have got busy lives, they've got jobs, careers, businesses, families. They don't have a huge amount of time to think about where they're going to give money. So when the university knocks on their door and says, can you support students coming through the system? Absolutely. It's an obvious place for people to give. It's made a big impact on their life. If they can give to that organisation, it will make a big impact on someone else's life. So absolutely, you can see why people, give back to their university. But that's largely because, we don't have a broader culture of philanthropy where you can learn more or get engaged more with a wider range of causes. So if we had a better infrastructure, a better understanding of all of the challenges out there and how our money could be applied, then I think we would see more money going into different areas as well as, the higher education sector.
People who are cynical about charities often discuss the fact that they spend a lot of money on their admin, on six-figure salaries for their staff, that, very little of the amount given to charities actually ends up with the causes and with the people who need that money. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it is founded on perhaps a misunderstanding of how the non-profit sector operates. I mean, the non-profit sector has all the same overheads that a for-profit business has. Actually, most of the time, they're doing things on a shoestring, trying very hard to keep those costs down. But if you look at what happened through the pandemic, suddenly frontline non-profit organisations are responding to huge social needs. They have to shift online in an instant. They have to reskill their staff on, at very short notice with very, very little resource to do that. So if we want to have effective services delivered to the people and places that need it most, we also need those organisations to be resourced effectively to do that work. So I think it's largely a misunderstanding of the fact that because it's charity, everybody's working for free. That's simply not the case. If we want good quality services delivered by non-profit organisations, and that needs to be funded.
Given the fact that the UK is one of the world's wealthiest nations, and we actually give more foreign aid per capita than most countries, we still have people on food banks and a huge wealth divide. It took a footballer months to get the government to change their policy on free school meals for the most hard-up kids in inner cities. What's going wrong? Is this a gap in government policy, but also a gap in the charities sector as well that needs to be addressed?
There are hundreds of thousands of charities in the UK doing fabulous work. Very often there's that visibility gap, and one of the things that philanthropy can do is bring issues to the surface, is to fund the kind of research work that's required to make these problems more visible. Marcus Rashford is a brilliant example of someone who, used his profile to put a real issue on the map and to make it something that we all care about. That's what philanthropy can do. It can support organisations to take that step into getting their cause, their issues much more widely understood, much more widely visible than it is if they're just, using all of their money on the front line to deliver services.
Very often when people are giving money or tempted to give money, they always want to know what impact it's going to have. They want to know that if they're going to part with their hard-earned cash, it's going to a good cause, it's going to the right place, and it's going to have a real effect. How would you recommend people do that? How do you recommend that people go about the checks and balances to make sure when they're feeling charitable that they know that money's going to the right place?
Philanthropy should be a partnership. It should be a partnership between the organisation and the donor. And, the donor can build a relationship with that organisation. There are brilliant fundraisers across the UK that do this, but it's not just fundraisers. You can be in touch with that organisation and learn more about its work, find out, how they are delivering change. And it's your money that contributed to that. So it's about partnership. And that's partly about fundraising organisations being open to those partnerships. And it's also about donors recognising that, this has to be quite light touch. Organisations don't have a huge amount of capacity to hold their hands. But of course, they want to make sure that their donors understand the impact of their work. So you have to build those relationships. You have to look for that kind of partnership. That's how you understand the impact of your money.
And has COVID had a bit of an impact on philanthropy? Has it made people feel more generous, given that we're in a pandemic and it's been evident that, quite frankly, the people on the margins of society have probably suffered the most during this? Or has it had the other effects of people holding on to their cash because their businesses are suffering or, the economy is not in the best of shape?
Looking at the whole of the pandemic, all of the evidence that's coming through suggests that the rich were very generous through the pandemic. They continued to support the organisations they'd always supported, and they gave more to new organisations. And they did that in an unrestricted way. They said to these organisations, you're facing multiple challenges, here's the money, go and do what you need to do. So we've seen giving actually going up through the years of the pandemic. The issue now is, how do we maintain that? How do we make sure those relationships are strong? How do we make sure that philanthropy is visible and its effects are visible so that we give confidence to people to keep going and keep giving more?
Kath, thank you so much for coming on and talking about philanthropy with us today. That's Kath Dovey, who's from the Beacon Collaborative, who helps make sure philanthropists' hard-earned cash is going to the right places. Well, joining us now is the CEO of the Armed Forces charity, SAFA, Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Gregory. Fantastic to have you on as well. Do you sometimes wish that your charity didn't need to exist and that government policy did more to look after veterans?
Alex, good afternoon. I mean, of course, we'd love not to have to exist. But what has been one of the great strengths of British society is the fusion of government resources and then the public's generosity. I would say I thought Kath's answers were fantastic. I agreed with every word she said, huge amount of common sense there. And what we've seen during the pandemic is actually an upsurge in support, both from people with significant resources and also those who are probably harder up. Over 50% of our supporters have donated to SAFA during the last 18 months. That is phenomenal, Alex.
And when you talk about your supporters, do they tend to be veterans themselves, members of the public, big-name donors, multi-millionaires? What sort of mosaic of giving do you have at SAFA?
So SAFA, which for those of your listeners that don't know, stands for the Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen and Families Association, has been around for over 135 years to support those in the military, veterans and their families when they need support. And our supporters, and that is both people who give their money and our 4,500 volunteers who do much of our frontline work, come from all sectors of society. Some obviously have links to the military. Some have very personal reasons for supporting the charity. Perhaps they've lost a loved one. And others just see that this is a cause they would like to support. And it's exactly as Kath said. It's a partnership between those who support us and the charity. And we need to explain what we're doing, the difference we're making, how the 80,000 people we helped last year have benefited, how we've improved their lives. So they come from all parts of society, Alex.
And do you ever encounter situations where you have philanthropists who might want to give money, but they want some sort of condition in return? Or is all charitable giving cynicism-free and I'm just a pessimist?
Well, you're challenging, and that's good. I think very rarely do we see cynical motives behind donations. And if we did, we might well not accept it. So what we see are people, rich and not so rich, who feel that supporting people who have been in the armed forces, who may have hit hard times, and I would say most veterans do extremely well after leaving the military and thrive and would make excellent employees. But when they struggle, people want to support. And very, very rarely have I ever detected any cynicism amongst any of our supporters, Alex.
It is an interesting one. I'm not saying this ever happens, but if someone wanted to donate a sizable sum of money to SAFA, but you suspected they were ill-gotten gains, would you draw a line and say, we can't accept this? Or is all money good money?
No, not all money is good money. So like any responsible organisation, large or small, we would look at where we think that money has come from. And if we felt it did not uphold the charity's values, and those values are extremely important to us, then we would not take it. And we've had very occasionally reason to question a donation. But I would come back to your first question. The importance of having a partnership between government and, in our case, military charities, I think is really important to people in the armed forces, because what it shows is the public want to support the men and women in our armed forces, and for their morale, that is critical.
On that front, is there ever an argument that perhaps we should be making sure that the super wealthy, we're not just talking about people on above average salaries, but the super wealthy are more accountable when it comes to taxation, actually therefore availing more money, one could argue, for the government to spend on protecting veterans, rather than enabling them to seek out loopholes to protect their own money and then choose how they wish to spend it philanthropically?
Well, I think that's definitely a question above my pay grade. I'm nowhere near that bracket. I think what I would like to see is the super wealthy choosing to donate to charities, and many of them do, and many of them are extremely generous. And if the government wishes to tax them more, that is for the government to decide, not for me to opine on.
Very well answered. You'd make a good politician, you know, Lieutenant. That's Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Gregory. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. The CEO, of course, of SAFA, who do incredible work for veterans, so do support them. Time for a short break now and a little look at the weather. Fingers crossed it's good.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A lot of cloud around for this coming night. As a result of this, a little bit less cold than it's been recently, particularly in the south. There is some rain around and the air's still cold enough though for some ice across Scotland as this rain mingles with colder air here. Some snow too for the mountains of northern Scotland. Elsewhere though, any early evening rain should soon clear away to leave a lot of cloud around. 1 or 2 clear spells for central and eastern England, but a good deal of cloudy grey weather to start Thursday morning. And after an early dip in temperatures across the east, well, those temperatures generally coming up from the west, so not as cold, particularly in the south, compared to last night. So it will be a fairly grey start to Thursday morning. Still some rain across parts of Scotland. This will tend to fizzle out for a time before being boosted by the next weather front coming in from the southwest. So quite a wet day to come for Scotland. Some rain too for Northern Ireland and for Northern England, but rain elsewhere across England and Wales, not really amounting to too much. And as the rain clears, we see some milder air coming into the southwest. So temperatures here, 11, 12, 13 degrees on Thursday afternoon. Still on the chilly side though, in and to the north of this rain band. And the air certainly cold enough for across Scotland on Thursday night into Christmas Eve morning for some quite significant snowfall across the mountains, so something to bear in mind if you're travelling here. Elsewhere though, for into Christmas Eve morning, the rain will clear through. We're left with clear spells, but a lot of damp ground, so potentially some fog patches forming, but it won't be as cold for most of us as it has been for some recent nights. So Christmas Eve could start quite grey, quite foggy across central southern England. The fog here will take its time to clear on Christmas Eve morning. So again, bear that in mind if you have Christmas travel plans. But the fog will lift from the west as this next band of rain comes in from the west. Some quite heavy rain for parts of southwest England, Wales into Northern Ireland. A drier day for Scotland. Scotland still in the colder air ahead of this weather front. And this sets the scene then as we move into Christmas Day. We've got cold air to the north and east of the UK, milder air trying to push into the south. Where these weather fronts separate the dividing line, well, that's where we've got the greatest chance of seeing snow. So quite an unsettled picture, so certainly some rain around at times, with some quite low temperatures in the north. Here we've got the chance of some snow too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. You're watching the Afternoon Agenda on GB News, and there's lots more still to come. Don't go anywhere, but first, here's the news headlines with the glorious Polly.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon. I'm Polly Middlehurst, and these are your latest GB News headlines. The number of confirmed daily COVID cases in the UK has reached six figures for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Government data showing 106,122 lab-confirmed cases were recorded in the last 24 hours. 140 people have also died within 28 days of testing positive in the same period. Well, the First Minister of Wales has announced the country will move to COVID alert level 2 on Boxing Day. The measures include 2-metre social distancing in public and in places of work. The rule of 6 has also been reinstated for pubs, restaurants, cinemas and theatres. Face coverings are going to be required in hospitality settings when moving around, and there'll be a limit on the number of people attending events indoors, 30 for indoors, 50 for outdoors. Meanwhile, the Welsh Health Minister will begin offering a new formulation of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine for at-risk children from the new year. That comes after the UK's Medicines and Healthcare Agency gave the green light to the jab. They say a review showed it was safe for 5 to 11-year-olds who are at risk or in contact with those who are vulnerable. Further advice regarding the vaccine for older children is expected in due course. Over 7,000 people in Scotland have been told their current partner has a history of abuse. New figures show that more than half of those who called a police hotline discovered they or their family member's partner had a violent or abusive past. The disclosure scheme for domestic abuse was launched 6 years ago, and officers say it has helped thousands escape becoming victims of violence or abuse themselves. That's a full update for you at the top of the hour. See you then.
This month saw the publication of a report on what's known as the Draft Online Safety Bill. We bang on about it a lot on this programme, so you've probably come across it. A committee of MPs has proposed big changes, including new criminal offences to boost safety on the internet. High time too, I say. Among other things, the bill proposes a crackdown on violence against women, pornography and cyberflashing, as well as stricter regulation of social media and tech giants to protect users. But as it undergoes further scrutiny, there are now calls for the bill to include online dating as a regulated industry because of fears over user safety. Well, joining us now is one of the people calling for the change to online dating, CEO of the dating app Safer Date, Elaine Parker. Elaine, great to have you on. I sympathise entirely with your position, but let's share with the audience, what was your reason for calling for this, calling of regulation of the dating industry? Because I'm sure a lot of people think, well, what? That's surely messing in our personal lives.
It's not messing in personal lives, really. My whole reason for doing this, I met somebody online. I thought that these dating apps actually had some sort of legal standard to keep you safe. And I learned through my own harrowing experience that it's not the case. The man that I met online who ended up moving in with my son and I had a long history of domestic abuse, and he was using these dating sites to find his victims. And there's nothing at all they do to prevent this. So, the online safety bill, it's so needed, and it needs to include dating services as quick as possible. There's currently no regulations at all for the dating industry. There's no legal standard whatsoever. So as a result, it's a really dangerous place now. Dating apps are selling people's data to make their money. That's how they can give the services for free. It's even in their small print, which people don't tend to realise. But, even worse than that, dating sites and apps are literally littered with fake profiles and criminals. People on a daily basis are being duped out of their life savings by fraudsters. They're even being attacked and raped. That was my experience. And the anonymity allowed on these dating apps because of the lack of regulations just creates a playground for criminals, and it really needs to change quickly to protect people.
There might be people watching this saying, look, when you meet someone in a bar or on a swipe left, swipe right sort of platform, then, both could be dreadful humans who are intent on causing harm. So what is it in particular about dating apps that carries more risk, perhaps, than meeting someone organically?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, a lot of people, like I do, naively thought that they did something to keep you safe. So straight away, people drop their guard slightly. But the other thing is, when you meet somebody online, because of the lack of regulations, they can literally be anybody they want to be. They can be sex offenders who've reinvented themselves with a fake email address. They could be fraudsters sat in a different country. You never know who you're talking to behind these screens. So, it's so much more dangerous online because of that anonymity and the lack of regulation.
And do you think the government are going to go far enough with this? There's a whole lot, really, that I think women like us are fed up with by now, quite frankly, whether it's the over-sexualisation of society, grooming of young children, children being able to watch porn. It's a mess out there, isn't it? How on earth have we got here? And do you trust this government to do something about it?
The online safety bill is definitely a step in the right direction, but I don't see how on earth they can tackle this problem, to be honest. I mean, the draft bill says they're going to tackle the tech giants, but if you look at the likes of, say, Facebook, for instance, Facebook is supposed to be a platform with a certain age limit, but all kids have to do is change the date of birth. You can literally be anybody you want to be. Adults can be on there, paedophiles can be there on there as children. And I don't see how the government are going to enforce them to change this full platform to make everybody have an identity check. It's a massive, massive thing that they're taking on. If they do it, great, but it's only a small step in the right direction. So much more needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree. I tell you what, Elaine, it strikes me that it took an IT degree for me to get home from Sicily the other day just to do the passenger locator form. So how children can watch porn beggars belief. Now, you set up an app called Safer Date. Let's talk about that. How does it differ from other dating apps?
Well, we're very, very proud to say it's actually the safest dating app in the world. I can say that hand on heart it is. After my experience, I wanted to set something up that really would protect people. So firstly, unlike any other dating app, we do an identity check. Now, it's to the same standards that every bank's use. So, they have to take a selfie and also go through a liveness check and upload their passport or driving license. And we make sure the person in the selfie is the same as their document and that it's a legitimate document. Once they've passed their ID check, we partner with an intelligence agency and we actually do a global criminal background check. Now, a lot of organisations use DBS, do a basic DBS check to vet their staff. But the basic DBS is UK only and it only shows convictions. So it only shows about 6% of the problem. We go so much further than that and we actually do a full global criminal background check above and beyond the standard to enhance DBS level. So we show not only convictions but cautions. So we literally make the platform as safe as we possibly can by keeping criminals off there.
Good work, Elaine. Keep it up. Elaine Parker, CEO and founder of Safer Date, making the world that little bit better for women. Still to come on the afternoon agenda. It is, of course, time to hear what you, the great viewers of GB News, think about philanthropy. I've been asking, is it time the super rich actually gave less but paid more tax instead? You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, Jigsaw is a staple of the high street. But an advert by the fashion brand favourite of the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, of course, has been banned for objectifying women. The ad promoting new boots on sale shows a woman climbing over a fence wearing just underwear, something we do all the time, right? Something the Advertising Standards Authority, ASA, says could cause serious offence. Jigsaw say they understand how the image could be perceived in a different way and have since agreed to remove it from any future branding. Well, joining us now is columnist at The Spectator, Samantha Smith. Samantha, great to have you aboard. Why is this, I mean, of all the things going on that are dreadful for women right now, that the Jigsaw poster's not awful, is it? It's not the worst.
I'm thinking exactly the same thing, Alex. You know, violent sexual offences are up 15% on last year, I believe, 164,700 odd offences of a sexual nature, as recorded in England and Wales last year. We've also seen, you know, an all-time rise in domestic violence. We're seeing objectification of women across the board in TV, film, advertising, real life. I still get catcalled on the street. I still have weird comments made by leery old men on social media and so forth. Realistically, a fashion brand putting up a provocative advert is the least of our worries. And underwear and lingerie companies do it all the time. So why not a fashion brand?
I mean, you make a very good point, because whenever I get the tube, rarely, I usually prefer walking, but whenever I do, the tube stations are littered with posters, largely for these online clothing retailers who frankly look like they're making children's clothing for girls who want to learn to be a stripper. I mean, Jigsaw hardly doing anything worse than anyone else out there. Do you think that this government needs to pull their socks up and actually start doing something about this hypersexualisation of society?
Exactly. I think that what we're seeing is tackling the molehill rather than the mountain. In this case, you're looking at Jigsaw, a fashion brand who has always been largely conservative, who has, you know, been endorsed by Kate Middleton, among other very senior celebrities and royals. And you're picking fault with one advertising campaign versus an entire culture of shameful and exploitative practices. Like I said, lingerie brands do it all the time. So why is it wrong for a clothing brand to do it? We've seen countless pro-inclusivity campaigns in major retailers recently of underwear, inclusive skin tones, etc., etc. So why is the nature, as the ASA said, sexually degrading or objectifying to women if it is a black and white image of a woman climbing over a fence with a thong on versus several women all in their bras and knickers on a big billboard? What's the difference?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. What is the difference? You're in a safe space with us here, Samantha. I like to consider my little team Feminist Corner. That's not to exclude you wonderful men folk out there. But tell me, how rubbish is life for you as a girl right now?
Well, we saw it all with the university spiking uproar. Students and young people, young women, feel increasingly unsafe on the streets. The cases of Sabina Nessa and Sarah Everard have highlighted that women really aren't safe wherever we go. We can't go about our normal lives without facing some sort of harassment or abuse or victimization. And this is just another way in which society seems to be painting women as victims. And there are very, very real issues facing women today with our safety and our security and sexualization of young women, especially in the modern Western world. You know, like I said, I face this every day on social media, having a small to moderate social media following. If I post a photo of myself, instantly there are people in my DMs or commenting degrading or just downright creepy things. But that is something that I'm concerned about. That's something that makes me fear for my safety when I get random letters from people who I have no idea how they found my address. The idea of Jigsaw posting a campaign of a woman in her thong is of absolutely no consequence to me, and I'm sure that many women would feel that there are bigger fish to fry when it comes to our safety and our security.
And what do you think is the root cause of all this? I mean, I've got my own theories, because I'm guessing I'm probably a good 10 years older than you at least. And I've seen sort of how society has changed over the almost 4 decades of my life. And I put the root cause of all of this with porn. the availability of porn, the normality of porn, the fact that now people talk about all sorts of things that are being considered, you know, blue in nature, degrading towards women, as if they're empowering. But what's your take on that, considering we have probably slightly different generational cohorts? Do you think that we have a problem with porn in this country or not?
I'd say that there has been a massive normalisation of sexually explicit content, especially when it comes to the pornography industry, the adult sex industry. I had it with my own university, my student union, in fact, advertising training sessions for students in the adult sex industry. There seems to be a blurred line between inclusivity and normalisation of dangerous practices and dangerous lifestyles. We shouldn't be encouraging young women to get involved in the sex industry, just as we shouldn't be legalizing prostitution to the extent of selling oneself on the street. It is all about normalizing healthy and safe lifestyle choices rather than potentially putting young women and young girls at risk in the name of progressiveness.
I couldn't agree more. Samantha, you're at Durham, aren't you? Is that your university?
Yes, yeah.
Which college?
Hatfield.
Ah, Hatfield. I was a Mary's girl. Lovely to speak to you, Samantha Smith.
I've heard good things about Mary's.
Oh, I was a Mary's girl and it was single sex, believe it or not. They let the boys in the year after I left,
I know
just
Hatfield
as well,
was,
I say.
Single sex until 1986 or 1987. But we're now very, very much co-ed.
I know, yeah, the sporty college. Samantha, it's been wonderful to speak to you. Let's catch up again soon. Samantha there, who's a student at Durham and a columnist at The Spectator. Now, Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cinderella is the latest West End show to close as rising COVID cases once again hits the performing arts sector hard. Over the course of the pandemic, music, performing and visual arts have already lost 80,000 jobs and around £4 billion in gross value, according to data from the Creative UK Group. With hundreds of theatres already forced to shut due to the virus, are we guilty of neglecting the creative arts industry? Well, joining us now is entertainment journalist Hayley Palmer. Hayley, great to have you in.
It's lovely to be here.
Love friends in the studio. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the arts, but they do get overlooked all the time, and this pandemic's been dreadful for them. How bleak is the situation out there?
Oh, I just feel it's dreadful. I mean, my heart really goes out to not only the performers, because that is their absolute passion. That's what they live for. That's what they get up for every morning. But the backstage crew, the lighting, the sound, the hair, the makeup, it's a whole family. We just go and see the performance. But I used to own a theatre school, so I know what happens backstage, and there's so much that goes into it, and my heart goes out to them. This is not the first time we've come back from lockdown. They thought they were getting somewhere. We supported the arts, and now they've had this massive blow. I mean, Andrew Lloyd Webber said, sadly, this is the right thing to do, not just for the safety of our cast, but for the quality of the show. We give our audiences who travel long distances and make significant investments to come and see us. So he's had to do this. We understand, you know, the safety aspect, but my heart really does go out to them.
Do we risk this sort of creating long-term damage to the arts sector when so many theatres have had to close? Are they going to reopen their doors again, or is this now going to be a pandemic of the death of the arts?
Oh, gosh, I hope not. I mean, I have read that bookings for the first part of 2022 are lower than expected. Cameron McIntosh said it was a worrying for everybody involved in the theatre land. So just fingers crossed that it can come back. You know, it's such a treat for us when we go to the theatre. You know, I know myself when I go, it takes your mind off everything. It's, you know, it's what we need for our mental health to go and experience it. So for them to close down and stuff, I think it's going to affect a lot of us.
And do you think the government have been failing to do their due duty, really, in protecting the arts? Because it is often a sector that's overlooked. People sort of don't value it as much as sciences or things that they can see practical, instant impacts. Do you think the government have done enough, or are they really falling behind?
I do feel like it gets overlooked. I mean, the last time I felt it did, my heart went out to them. So that's why when they came back, I tried to support every single theatre show I could just to get behind them, because I really felt, you know, for the performers and, like I say, everyone involved. I mean, it's not just Cinderella. We've got Hamilton that's closed, Matilda, Wicked, The Lion King, Cabaret, Come From Away, Bring It On. That opened last week. I went to see it last week. It's now closed. I mean, it's just so painful.
And you worried that we're going to have, I mean, we've told there's no restrictions up until Christmas, although there are obviously things going on that's making it very difficult for theatres to operate. But are you worried now that this is going to be a long-term batch of restrictions again?
Well, yes, because, I mean, they've hopefully said February 2022, fingers crossed. You know, I really do wish that happens, but we just don't know, and they don't know. So as performers, they probably feel, well, you know, it's Christmas at the moment, you know, it's probably nice, you know, to have maybe some time off. But once it gets back to January, February, you know, they live for performing. You know, they've trained for years to become these amazing performers. This is what they do. This is their passion. And I really feel like we need to support it more, the arts.
I'm assuming, though, that when we had the first sort of full lockdowns, it must have been very difficult for troupes to actually get together to rehearse, to have the orchestra in the pit, to have the actors on the stage and the understudies and everybody actually in real time, real life being able to do their rehearsals. At least now, hopefully, that side of things might still be able to continue ticking over.
Yes, I mean, I can imagine, I know with programmes like Dancing on Ice, I've spoken to the cast on there, and I know that they're in bubbles at the moment. So, like the pros would get together and they'd all rehearse together in one bubble. So I think it is, you know, things like that maybe might be happening to get the shows back. But I guess without not knowing when it's going to come back, I guess they just don't know what to do. So I guess we just have to watch this space. But I know, for one, I will definitely be supporting the arts when it comes back. And I hope we can all get behind them to make the theatre survive.
I mean, the pandemic at least saw a lot of innovation happen, particularly when it comes to doing things virtually. And there are a number of theatres who managed to put on productions that we could all pay to watch online. Are we getting more of that being suggested at the moment? And is there anything you can recommend?
Yes, I do believe that might happen. But, I mean, it's not the same, as we know. But it is an option. It's something that I would do. I'd love to, like, watch it at home and support them. But I guess we just have to, again, watch this space. I mean, at the moment, all we know is that Andrew Lloyd Webber has announced that today. We know that theatre shows are shutting by the day. I do believe there are some pantomimes still open, but I can see on the Twitter feed, you're just seeing the shows just popping up every day. We're closing, we're so sorry. So, yes, again, I just think we'll have to just, you know, watch this space and just have our fingers crossed for the theatres.
And when you sit at home watching things online virtually, do you have your little mini tub of ice cream and put your gin and tonic in the plastic cup?
Oh, yes. No, I have my Doritos, Maltesers. I'm sitting there eating away, happy as Larry.
Hayley, it's been lovely having you here and in the
Pleasure.
studio as well. Thank you so much. Hayley Palmer there, who's an entertainment journalist. Support the arts, people. You don't want to lose them. Now, today, we've been talking about philanthropy. That ties in, doesn't it? I've been asking, should the super rich give less but pay more tax? Well, earlier on the afternoon agenda, we spoke to philanthropist and founder of Phones for You, John Caudwell, who said he would like to see wealthy individuals do more to help others.
It can be quite unpopular in certain quarters because I advocate absolutely everybody pays the taxes in the UK, pays the appropriate taxes and joins the Giving Pledge. And, you know, I just don't know why people don't do that, because when you're super wealthy, it's your duty to pay your taxes. It's the duty to help the people in the country that have helped you make the money. But I also have the other argument really as well, which is, why would you want to leave billions behind to your family and children when you could leave half of that, and you could argue that half of enough is more than enough to decadently spoil those children's lives, but at least you'd be giving half to good causes, which you can then put down in your will as to which causes they might be. I mean, my causes that I've got in my will, and I hope to do a lot more during my lifetime, incidentally, but, you know, whatever's left behind for my children to do, the causes are very demanding. It's very demanding on the children to do due diligence on the charities, make sure the charities are super effective, and wherever possible to use the donation that they make on my behalf to leverage other people's money and get to influence and get other people to do the same thing.
He's a good egg, isn't he, that John Caudwell? Let's all be a bit more like John. Well, let's hear what you, the viewer, has had to say. And lots of you have been getting in touch, as always. Now, Dawn has said on email, the problem is that philanthropy can be used as a cover for more sinister agendas. I was interested to learn about Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano appeal, don't know who that is, for an anti-globalist alliance. And I think this would be a very good way of monitoring the rich and powerful. Oh, I'll look into that, Dawn, never heard of it. Peter says, no, They'll leave the country, assuming wealthy people, if we hike up taxes, as they did in the 60s, and France. The US and other countries would benefit. The government are so useless, they'll waste the extra money. Someone else says, in short, if they want to give, fine. If not, that's fine too. There's double tax waiting at their death in the form of inheritance taxes, unless we stop that bad thing too. If you got it without breaking the law, it's yours and no one else's. A state or individual can claim it by force. You have your liberty in a free country. Too true. Chris says, maybe we shouldn't take the high ground in charity donations. Charities need the money. To turn away donations from Shell, for example, is political ideology gone mad. Do you know, I couldn't agree with that. It's fascinating, isn't it, how much the charities sector is dominated by left wokeists who scoff and scorn those of us who might have slightly different political viewpoints but are still fundamentally good people. Now, finally, another viewer says, a flat-rate, binary, low-tax system, it raises more revenue. Healthcare funded by charitable donations may soften the edges of welfare, but does not work. Earlier, we asked you, should the super rich give less and pay more tax instead? Well, 34% of you say no. However, 2/3 of you say, yes, they should tax them. Do you know what? I don't know where I stand on this, but I do think that most people who give charitably, most philanthropists out there are doing it for the right reasons. And just as John Caudwell said earlier, even if they're not, the people on the receiving end who desperately need that money, frankly, don't care whether it's an ego trip or from the goodness of their hearts. Well, you've been watching The Afternoon Agenda with me, Alex Phillips, here on GB News. I'm back again from tomorrow, 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. Coming up next, of course, it's the delectable Dewberry. Michelle, of course, with Dubes & Co. Stay tuned for her. But for me, it's time to make a cup of tea and put my feet up. Bye-bye.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A lot of cloud around for this coming night. As a result of this, a little bit less cold than it's been recently, particularly in the south. There is some rain around and the air's still cold enough though for some ice across Scotland as this rain mingles with colder air here. Some snow too for the mountains of northern Scotland. Elsewhere though, any early evening rain should soon clear away to leave a lot of cloud around. 1 or 2 clear spells for central and eastern England, but a good deal of cloudy grey weather to start Thursday morning. And after an early dip in temperatures across the east, well, those temperatures generally coming up from the west, so not as cold, particularly in the south, compared to last night. So it will be a fairly grey start to Thursday morning. Still some rain across parts of Scotland. This will tend to fizzle out for a time before being boosted by the next weather front coming in from the southwest. So quite a wet day to come for Scotland. Some rain too for Northern Ireland and for Northern England, but rain elsewhere across England and Wales, not really amounting to too much. And as the rain clears, we see some milder air coming into the southwest. So temperatures here, 11, 12, 13 degrees on Thursday afternoon. Still on the chilly side though, in and to the north of this rain band. And the air certainly cold enough for across Scotland on Thursday night into Christmas Eve morning for some quite significant snowfall across the mountains, so something to bear in mind if you're travelling here. Elsewhere though, into Christmas Eve morning, the rain will clear through. We're left with clear spells, but a lot of damp ground, so potentially some fog patches forming, but it won't be as cold for most of us as it has been for some recent nights. So Christmas Eve could start quite grey, quite foggy across central southern England. The fog here will take its time to clear on Christmas Eve morning. So again, bear that in mind if you have Christmas travel plans. But the fog will lift from the west as this next band of rain comes in from the west. Some quite heavy rain for parts of southwest England, Wales into Northern Ireland. A drier day for Scotland. Scotland still in the colder air ahead of this weather front. And this sets the scene then as we move into Christmas Day. We've got cold air to the north and east of the UK, milder air trying to push into the south. Where these weather fronts separate the dividing line, well, that's where we've got the greatest chance of seeing snow. So quite an unsettled picture, so certainly some rain around at times, with some quite low temperatures in the north. Here we've got the chance of some snow too.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi, I'm Alistair Stewart, and I really hope that you can join me here on GB News. I've been in this game for 40 years and I've made lots of friends, and I try and reflect what they think about the big stories of the day in conversation with me. That's why we call it Alistair Stewart and Friends, and you're a key part of it as well. I always get inundated with emails and messages and texts, and if they're really good, I play them back to you. 12 till 3 every Saturday and Sunday.